Wealthy alien girl disguises as a beggar to test kindness. Only a human past. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. John Harris had always lived a simple life. He wasn't rich, not even close, but he had something most people didn't. He had kindness. Working as a taxi driver in a city where people seemed to be in a hurry all the time, John had seen the worst of the world. The hustlers, the schemers, the people who used others to get ahead. But John wasn't one of those people. He always took the time to help someone in need, even if it meant going out of his way. One chilly afternoon, as he drove his taxi down the busy street, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. A young woman, sitting on the cold sidewalk, wrapped in a tattered coat. Her appearance wasn't what caught his attention. Her eyes were. They were filled with sadness, but also something else. Something that made him pause. He could tell she wasn't just another homeless person, not by her posture, not by the way she held herself. He stopped the cab, stepped out, and approached her. "Hey there," he said gently, offering a warm smile. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, her piercing green eyes filled with a strange mixture of surprise and wariness. She was beautiful, in a way that made John feel uneasy. He had seen rich people with that kind of beauty before, something almost otherworldly about it. But there was something more here, something different. "I'm fine," she replied quietly, her voice carrying a faint accent. "Just passing through." John offered her a ride, which she reluctantly accepted. She didn't speak much during the ride, only staring out the window as they drove through the busy streets. John kept glancing at her, sensing there was something more to her story. They arrived at a rundown part of town, where the streets were filled with broken cars and abandoned buildings. John noticed how out of place she seemed here, like she didn't belong. Before he could offer to help, she turned to him with a small, almost knowing smile. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "But I don't need anything else from you." John frowned. "Are you sure? I can't just drop you off here. It's not safe." She shook her head. "I'll be fine." With that, she stepped out of the cab and walked away. John watched her for a moment, feeling uneasy. There was something about her that didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him when she first sat in the cab, or maybe it was the way she carried herself, like she was hiding something. As he pulled away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just met someone very important, though he had no idea just how important yet. Later that evening, he would find out exactly who she was. But for now, he drove on, wondering about the mysterious woman with the strange eyes. The following days passed with John unable to shake the feeling that something about that woman was more than just strange. He found himself driving through the city streets, distracted by her eyes, by the way she seemed so out of place in the rundown neighborhood where she had gotten off. It was only after a few days that his curiosity got the better of him. On his day off, he decided to return to the area where he had dropped her off, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. As he drove through the streets, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the city pressing in on him. The buildings, once vibrant, were now decaying. Graffiti covered the walls, and abandoned cars lined the sidewalks. It was the kind of place people ignored, the kind of place no one wanted to be. But she had been different. He couldn't understand why someone like her would be in such a place. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw her again, standing outside a small cafe, talking to a group of rough-looking people. They seemed to be listening intently to her, though she wasn't saying much. Her posture was commanding, but there was something about the way she stood that made her look vulnerable. She was wearing the same tattered coat, the same disguise she had worn before, but there was no mistaking it. This was the same woman. She saw him watching from the street and raised an eyebrow, as if she had expected him. He quickly turned his eyes away, unsure of what to do next. He hadn't meant to stare, but something about her presence kept pulling him in. As he drove past, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw her walking toward him. His heart skipped a beat. He pulled over, the engine humming softly as he waited. She approached, her face unreadable. She stopped just short of the cab and gave him a cool smile. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon," she said, her voice soft but firm. John opened the door, motioning for her to get in. "Need a ride?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. I don't think I need a ride, but I could use someone to talk to, she replied, her gaze lingering on him for a moment before she climbed into the cab. Where to? John asked, still feeling a little off balance. Somewhere quiet, she said, her voice dropping lower. I think you'll understand why. As they drove, the city faded away. The streets grew quieter, and the lights grew dimmer. John stole a glance at her, trying to make sense of the situation. She was still in her disguise, yet there was a sense of confidence about her that he hadn't noticed before. You're not like the others, she said suddenly, breaking the silence. The others? John asked, confused. The ones who just pass by? The ones who don't see the truth? Her voice was low, almost as if she was speaking to herself. You stopped. You didn't look away. John's brow furrowed. Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I just helped someone in need. Exactly, she replied with a small smile. That's what makes you different. The car stopped in front of a small, quiet park. She got out, but before she shut the door, she turned to face him. Thank you, she said simply, her voice barely above a whisper. John watched her walk away, feeling something stir inside him. It wasn't just the mystery of who she was, or why she seemed so different. It was the way she made him feel, as if he had done something important. But what? He drove away, his mind racing with questions. Something was definitely different about her, and he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. John couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time he closed his eyes, her face would appear, her eyes intense with mystery and something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. The moments he had spent with her, brief as they were, lingered in his mind, like a whisper he couldn't ignore. He found himself driving around the city more often, just to pass the spot where he had dropped her off, hoping for another chance encounter. Days turned into weeks, and though he tried to focus on his work, it was impossible to shake the feeling that something was drawing him toward her. Then, one evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, he saw her again. She was standing in front of a cafe, looking out over the city, her coat wrapped tightly around her. But this time, there was something different. She wasn't hiding anymore. As he drove by, she saw him, and this time, instead of looking away, she smiled, a smile that felt more genuine than the one she had given him before. Without thinking, John stopped the cab, his heart pounding in his chest. He stepped out, his shoes clicking against the pavement. I was hoping I'd run into you again, he said, his voice a little steadier than he felt. She looked at him for a long moment, as though weighing his words. I was starting to think you wouldn't come back, she said softly. Why would I not? John asked, his confusion mixing with something else, something deeper. She gave a small shrug, her eyes never leaving his. I wasn't sure if you were the kind of man who helped people, or if you were just curious about me. I help people, John said firmly, stepping closer. And I'm curious about you. More than you know. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Curiosity is a powerful thing, she said, her voice almost thoughtful. It can drive people to do things they wouldn't normally do. And what about you? John asked, his voice dropping lower. What drives you? She smiled again, a little sadder this time. I'm not sure anymore, she said. I used to know. I used to be so sure of everything. But now, she trailed off, her gaze distant. Now what? John asked, his heart racing. She turned back to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Now, I'm learning that sometimes it's not about having all the answers. Sometimes, it's about who you trust to help you find them. The words hit him harder than he expected. He had helped her, yes, but he had never considered that it might mean more to her than just a simple act of kindness. She looked down at the ground, and for a moment, there was a silence between them, one filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, she looked up again, her eyes meeting his. I have something to show you, she said. John felt a knot form in his stomach, wondering what this could mean. What is it? He asked, his curiosity growing. She stepped back, motioning for him to follow. It's better if I show you. Come with me. Without thinking, John followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. She led him through the city, down alleyways and quiet streets, until they arrived at an old building that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. This is where I've been staying, she said, pushing open the door. Inside, the space was dimly lit, with old furniture and dust covering every surface. But what caught John's attention was the view from the window. He could see the entire city spread out before him, the lights twinkling in the distance. "It's beautiful," he said, stepping closer to the window. She nodded, standing beside him. "It used to be," she said quietly. "But now it feels different." John turned to her, sensing the weight behind her words. "What happened?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not the person I used to be, and I'm not sure who I am anymore." John's heart went out to her. He had seen so much of the world's coldness, but in her, he saw someone who was searching for something more, something real. "You're not alone," he said softly. "Not anymore." As John stood by the window, his thoughts were racing. The city stretched out before him, its bright lights a stark contrast to the dusty, forgotten room he now found himself in. The silence between him and the woman who had brought him here was almost suffocating, yet there was something oddly comforting about it. Her presence, though quiet, seemed to fill the space in a way he couldn't explain. He looked at her again, noticing how her posture had softened, as though the weight of the world had somehow lightened just a little. "You're not alone," he had said earlier, and despite his uncertainty about everything that was happening, he meant it. She turned to him slowly, her gaze meeting his, and for a brief moment, he saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I've been hiding," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "From myself, from everyone." John didn't know what to say. He wasn't the kind of person to push someone for answers, especially not someone who had been so guarded. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said simply. The words seemed to hang in the air between them. He wasn't offering a solution or a grand promise. It was just a statement, a truth that felt right. She took a step closer, her face softening as she studied him. "Why are you so different?" she asked, her voice still low. "I don't know," John replied honestly. "I just believe in helping people, no matter who they are, where they come from." She let out a breath, almost as if she had been holding it for a long time. "Most people don't see it that way. They're too busy to care about others, or they see something in you and decide whether or not you're worth their time." John nodded. He had seen it countless times. People rushing through life, ignoring the struggles of others, focused only on their own ambitions. But he wasn't like that. He had seen too many people fall through the cracks, too many others turn their backs. "But you," she continued, "you didn't hesitate. You didn't judge me." He was quiet for a moment, letting her words settle. "Why would I?" he asked. "You're a person, just like me." She stared at him for a long time, her eyes scanning his face, perhaps searching for something he wasn't sure he had. Then, without warning, she smiled, a soft, genuine smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "You're different, John," she said. "Maybe that's what I need." The simplicity of her words caught him off guard. He wasn't sure what she meant by it, but somehow, he felt a sense of warmth in his chest, as if something inside him had been waiting to hear those words. "You're not like everyone else," she repeated. "I can see that now." John didn't know what to say. He had no idea what the future held or how things would unfold between them. But in that moment, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going anywhere. Whatever this was, whatever path they were about to walk down, he was willing to walk it with her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice steady. She seemed to take comfort in his words, her smile widening just a little. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, not knowing how to express the surge of emotions that ran through him. He had always believed in helping people, in doing what was right. But now, standing in this forgotten room with her, he realized it was more than that. It was about connection. It was about showing up for someone, no matter who they were or where they came from. And maybe, just maybe, it was about finding something in himself that he didn't know was there. The night was quiet around them, the sounds of the city distant. But inside that small room, John felt something shift. Something important. The journey ahead was unclear, but he knew it was a journey he didn't want to face alone. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel so alone. Together, they stood by the window, watching the city, but neither of them was truly seeing it. They were seeing something else, something neither of them had expected. And that was enough for now. John's days began to blend together in a way that he hadn't expected. The time he spent with her, Lyra, was never long enough, but it was enough to change something inside him. Their conversations were always brief, yet they left him thinking for hours afterward. She had been so closed off at first, hidden behind layers of mystery and carefully crafted facades. But as time passed, John noticed the cracks. There were moments when she allowed herself to drop the guard, when her vulnerability showed through just enough for him to catch a glimpse of the person beneath the walls she had built. Every time they met, they talked about something new. At first, it was the city, how it seemed to swallow people whole, how it kept moving no matter who it left behind. Then it was her life, her past. The more she spoke, the more John realized how different she was from everyone he had ever known. She wasn't just some wealthy alien, testing people out of curiosity or boredom. She had been through things, seen things, things that had shaped her in ways she was still coming to understand. The alien world she came from had its own rules, its own power dynamics, and Lyra had been forced into a role she never asked for. "I was born into something bigger than I ever wanted," she had said one evening, her voice soft as they sat together, the night sky stretching endlessly above them. "Sometimes I wonder if I was just a pawn in someone else's game." John looked at her, seeing something in her eyes that he had never expected. She wasn't just an alien girl from another world. She was someone who had fought, had struggled with the weight of her own identity. "You don't have to be anyone's pawn," he said, his voice steady. She smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile, like she was still trying to believe it. "Maybe, but I don't know how to break free from what's already been set in motion." John didn't have an answer for that. He wasn't sure how to break free from the things that controlled his own life, let alone someone who had a whole galaxy to navigate. But he knew one thing. She deserved more than the role she had been given, and he would be there for her, as much as she would let him. Over the next few weeks, their interactions deepened. They would meet in quiet places, parks, small cafes, hidden corners of the city, places where they could talk without the world pressing in on them. John began to understand her more, to see her not as the alien princess hiding behind a disguise, but as someone who was learning to trust. It wasn't easy for her. Trusting people hadn't come naturally, and for someone who had spent so long guarding every emotion, it took time. But every time she opened up, it was like a small piece of the world she had built around herself came crumbling down. And John, as much as he didn't want to admit it, was falling for her. It wasn't just her beauty, though that was undeniable. It was the way she spoke, the way she carried herself with a quiet strength, even when she didn't believe in it herself. It was in the way she listened, the way she saw him, not just as another person, but as someone who could make a difference in her life. He knew he couldn't fix everything for her. He couldn't undo the years of struggle, the weight of her past. But he could be there. And for now, that was enough. One evening, after another conversation that seemed to stretch into eternity, Lyra turned to him with a look of determination in her eyes. "I think I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city in the distance. "Ready for what?" John asked, his heart skipping a beat. "Ready to stop hiding." Her words hit him like a tidal wave. She wasn't just talking about her disguise, about her life in the shadows. She was talking about everything. About trusting, about letting go of the walls she had spent so long building. And as John looked into her eyes, he realized that this was the moment they had both been waiting for, when everything could change. Together, the next few days were a whirlwind. Lyra had kept her word, and with each passing moment, she seemed to grow more comfortable in her own skin. It wasn't just the disguise she had worn to shield herself from the world that was coming off. It was the mask she had built up over years, one layer at a time. John could see the change in her. Every time she spoke, every time she looked at him, there was less fear, less hesitation. She was learning to trust, and it was clear that she was no longer hiding behind the walls she had spent so much time constructing. But even as things between them grew more open, there was still a lingering weight on her shoulders, a past that she hadn't fully revealed. John didn't press her for answers, though. He knew it would take time, but he was patient. He didn't need to know everything, not yet. What mattered was that she was here, with him, and she was starting to believe in something better for herself. That night, they sat together on a bench in the park, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The air was cool, but there was a sense of warmth between them that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I don't know what to do next," Lyra said softly, her eyes focused on the lights across the park. "I've spent so long just trying to survive, trying to be something I wasn't, that I don't even know who I am anymore." John turned to look at her, his gaze steady and kind. "You're still you," he said gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just take it one step at a time." She looked at him, and for a moment, he saw something shift in her expression, something vulnerable, but also powerful. "What if I don't know where to go?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. John smiled softly. "You don't have to know. I'm here with you. You don't have to figure it all out alone." The weight of his words seemed to hang in the air between them. Lyra's eyes softened, and she took a deep breath, as though releasing some of the tension that had built up over the years. "Maybe that's what I've been afraid of," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "Being alone." John reached out, gently placing a hand on hers. "You don't have to be," he said. They sat there for a long time, the sounds of the city fading into the background. For the first time in what felt like forever, they both found a sense of peace, even if just for a moment. The following week, things began to change even more rapidly. Lyra started to open up more about her past, sharing pieces of herself she had kept hidden for so long. It wasn't easy for her, but with John's patient listening and quiet support, she began to unravel the tightly wound threads of her life. "I was raised to be something I never wanted to be," she told him one evening as they sat at the small cafe they frequented. "I was always told what to do, how to act, who to be. I never had a choice." John listened intently, not interrupting, just letting her speak. He could hear the pain in her words, the weight of years of feeling trapped. "And now?" he asked softly, after a moment of silence. Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching. "Now? I want to choose for myself. I want to be the person I've always been afraid to be. But I don't know how." John's hand found hers again, and this time, she didn't pull away. "You'll figure it out," he said with quiet certainty. "And I'll be here, no matter what." For the first time in a long while, Lyra allowed herself to believe it. She had been running from her past for so long, but now, with John by her side, she saw the possibility of something new, something better. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like a road she was ready to walk. Together, Lyra's world had started to shift in ways she hadn't expected. As the days passed, John's presence in her life became a steady force, one she no longer questioned. She had begun to open up more, allowing herself to share pieces of her past, even if it wasn't easy. She still wasn't completely sure about the path she was on, but with each step forward, she found herself less afraid of it. She had spent so much of her life under the control of others, trapped by the expectations placed upon her. But now, with John, she realized that she could begin to make her own choices. There was still much for her to figure out, but for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. One afternoon, they sat together in a quiet park, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments where they didn't have to talk, just exist together. But this time, John turned to her, his gaze soft but serious. "How are you really feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lyra smiled faintly, a bit surprised by the question. It wasn't that she hadn't shared her thoughts with him before, but there was something about his tone that made her realize how much he cared. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I had everything figured out before, but now it feels like I'm still finding pieces of myself I didn't even know were missing." John nodded, understanding. "It's okay not to have it all figured out," he said. "I think we're always discovering new things about ourselves, no matter where we are in life." Lyra looked at him, the weight of his words settling in. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace, like maybe she didn't need to have all the answers right now. She didn't need to rush. She could take things at her own pace. "I used to think that I had to be someone else," she said quietly, her eyes downcast. "Someone stronger, someone more confident, someone who could live up to everyone's expectations. But I've been hiding for so long that I've forgotten who I really am." John reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to be anyone else," he said softly. "You're already more than enough." Lyra's heart skipped a beat at his words. It was so simple, yet it meant everything to her. She had spent so much of her life feeling like she wasn't enough, like she wasn't worthy of anything more than the life that had been chosen for her. But here, with John, it felt like maybe she could be something else, something better. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For being here, for listening, for not giving up on me." John smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'll always be here," he said quietly. "No matter what." For the first time in a long time, Lyra felt like she had a future worth living for. She didn't know exactly what that future looked like yet, but she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone. And maybe that was all she needed to know for now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat there together in comfortable silence, their fingers intertwined, the weight of the world seeming just a little bit lighter. As the days passed, John and Lyra's bond grew stronger. They spent more time together, learning about each other, sharing stories that once felt too painful to revisit. With each conversation, Lyra let go of another layer of her past, and with each moment, John found himself drawn deeper into her world. Lyra had always been a person of control, hiding behind the walls she had built to protect herself. But now, with John, she began to understand that it was okay to let go, to show vulnerability. It wasn't easy, but it was happening. One evening, they sat in the park again, the world around them quiet as they watched the stars above. Lyra leaned her head against John's shoulder, her breath steady and calm. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked, her voice soft, almost uncertain. John glanced at her, surprised by the question. It wasn't like her to ask about things she couldn't control. "Sometimes," he replied, his voice gentle. "But mostly, I focus on what I can do now. The future is always changing, but what we do today, that's what matters." Lyra smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I think I've been too focused on what I can't control," she said. "I've spent so much time trying to plan every step, trying to be the person I thought I had to be. But I'm learning that it's okay not to have everything figured out." John took her hand in his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to have all the answers," he said. "You just have to be you. And that's more than enough." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for helping me see that." He smiled, his heart warming at her words. "I didn't do anything," he said softly. "You've been doing the work. I'm just here to walk with you." She nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I think I've spent too long trying to find answers in the wrong places," she said. "But maybe the answers were inside me all along." John felt a wave of pride for her. She had come so far from the guarded, distrustful person he had first met. She was opening up, not just to him, but to herself. And that was something powerful. "You're stronger than you know," he said, his voice full of admiration. Lyra gave him a look of quiet determination. "I'm starting to believe that," she said. "And maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to believe in the future too." They sat in silence for a while longer, letting the stillness of the night surround them. For the first time, Lyra didn't feel the pressure of her past weighing her down. She didn't feel the need to have everything figured out. All she had to do was live in the moment, in the present, with the person who had shown her that it was okay to be vulnerable. As the night wore on, they stood up from the park bench, their hands still entwined. "Let's go," John said with a smile. "Where to?" Lyra asked, raising an eyebrow. John looked out at the horizon, where the city lights shimmered in the distance. "Wherever life takes us," he said. Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in her chest. "That sounds perfect." Together, they walked off into the night, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that they would face it together. John and Lyra had come a long way since that first meeting. The journey they were on had taken unexpected turns, but now, as they walked together through the quiet streets, it felt as if the world had finally aligned for them. It wasn't perfect, life never was, but they were no longer afraid of the unknown. They had each other. The city had changed too, in a way. The noise, the chaos, it all seemed to fade into the background when they were together. They no longer felt like they were just going through the motions. There was meaning in the way they moved through the world, a shared understanding that life was about more than just surviving. It was about living, truly living, with purpose and connection. They reached a quiet part of town, a little park they had visited a few times before. It wasn't large, but there was something about it that always made Lyra feel at ease. She stopped for a moment, looking up at the sky, the stars scattered like little diamonds across the dark canvas. "You ever think about how small we are in all this?" she asked, her voice soft. John followed her gaze, his eyes tracing the constellations. "I do sometimes," he said. "But I also think about how we can make a difference, no matter how small we feel. Every choice we make, every person we connect with, it all matters." Lyra turned to him, a thoughtful look in her eyes. "I think I'm starting to understand that," she said. "For so long, I tried to control everything. I thought I had to be perfect, that I had to have everything figured out. But now," she trailed off, her smile gentle. "Now, I'm okay with not having all the answers. John smiled back, his heart swelling with pride for her. And that's perfectly okay, he said. We're all figuring it out, one step at a time. They stood there for a while, just enjoying the peace of the moment. It was as if the weight of everything they had both been through had lifted, even if just for a little while. And in that space, they both realized something. They didn't need to have it all figured out to be happy. They didn't need to be perfect. They just needed to be present, together. As they continued walking through the park, Lyra's hand found John's, her fingers slipping naturally between his. They didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. Hope for a future she could shape. Hope for a life that was truly hers, not dictated by anyone else's expectations. She felt free. The future was still uncertain, but it was hers to embrace, hers to build. And as they walked side by side, their steps in sync, Lyra knew that no matter what came next, she had everything she needed right here. John, the person who had shown her what it meant to trust, to live, to truly be herself. With him by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the world had in store.